This is the story of one of the most legendary failures in business history. See, Ford set out to build the car of the future. Instead, what they created was the Edsel, a cautionary tale for the ages. Okay, get this, $250 million. Now, in the 1950s, that was the single biggest bet ever placed on a consumer product. And listen, this was just the money to get it off the ground. The final price tag for this failure? Oh, it was going to be much, much higher. So that's the big question we're digging into, right? How could a company with seemingly endless resources, all the best minds, and this grand vision get it so catastrophically wrong? Well, the answer is a fascinating, almost unbelievable tragedy of errors. All right, so let's set the scene. Picture this. It's the mid-1950s. Post-war America is absolutely booming. The economy's on fire, and the automobile is king. Ford looks around and sees this gap in the market, and they decide they're going to build something revolutionary, a real dream car for the thriving American middle class. And when I say their plan was ambitious, I mean it was just staggering. They weren't just launching another car. No. They were aiming to reshape the entire market. Their goal? To sell 200,000 cars in the first year alone. And to pull that off, they knew they needed to create something truly unforgettable. And this is where we find the story's tragic flaw. The single biggest reason the Edsel was basically doomed before the first one even rolled off the assembly line. It all came down to this critical, fatal shift in the market. You see, the whole concept for the Edsel was born in 1955, right at the peak of an economic boom. Back then, buyers wanted chrome, they wanted fins, they wanted pure horsepower. But by the time the car actually launched, just 2 years later in 1957, a recession had hit, and suddenly the public's taste had shifted completely to smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. So the Edsel was this magnificent, really expensive answer to a question from 1955. It's like they spent years building the perfect surfboard for a wave that had already crashed. Ford was literally looking in the rearview mirror to design the car of the future. And on top of that market timing disaster, there was this whole series of bizarre, almost comical mistakes that plagued the car's development. And it all started with just trying to figure out what to call the thing. 18,000. That is how many potential names Ford's marketing agencies and all their researchers came up with. They were absolutely determined to find the perfect name through science and data. They spent a fortune on something called motivation research, trying to get inside the subconscious desires of the American car buyer. They were polling thousands of people on the street, they hired the best agencies. They left no stone unturned in the scientific quest for a name. And in a particularly strange move, they even hired a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet for suggestions. And she came back with some real gems, including the utopian turtle top and the intelligent bullet. Yeah, needless to say, those were politely rejected. So here's the ultimate irony. After all that time, all that money, and all that scientific research, the chairman of the board just ignored all of it. In a perfect example of a flawed internal culture, he made a top-down, emotional decision to name the car Edsel in honor of Henry Ford's deceased son. Even the Ford family was against it, but the decision was final. But the fumbles didn't stop with the name. The car's design, which was supposed to be revolutionary, was met with instant ridicule. The most memorable, and pretty brutal, critique of its unique vertical grille, one journalist said it looked like an Oldsmobile sucking a lemon. Ouch. So, let's recap. We've got a name nobody liked, a design people mocked, and a market that had pretty much vanished. With all that baggage, the Edsel finally launched. And the debut, well, it was a complete and utter disaster. The cars that actually arrived in the showrooms were just a catalog of flaws. That vertical grille was cruelly nicknamed the toilet seat. An innovative push-button transmission, placed right in the center of the steering wheel, was awkward and notoriously unreliable. And worse, the first models were rushed and just riddled with quality control problems. We're talking oil leaks, trunks that wouldn't open, hoods that wouldn't close. It wasn't just a car for the wrong market. It was a poorly made car. Period. So yeah, the dream was dead. Now all that was left was to count the cost and try to learn the lesson from one of the most expensive failures in corporate history. Remember that initial $250 million investment? Well, when you add in all the losses from manufacturing and marketing, the total financial damage was around $350 million. For the 1950s, that's an almost unbelievable sum of money. And so, just over 2 years after its grand debut, Ford officially pulled the plug. The car of the future was now officially a relic of the past. So what really is the Edsel failure? It's what happens when an organization becomes so obsessed with its own brilliant idea that it just stops looking at the world around it. They built the perfect, most expensive surfboard imaginable, only to discover the ocean had gone completely flat. The ultimate lesson here is so clear. The Edsel was designed using data and desires from the past. You can't build the future by looking in the rearview mirror. Ford tried to do exactly that, and it drove them straight off a cliff. True innovation requires looking ahead, not behind. Which brings us to a final thought. It's easy to look back and see Ford's mistake. It's much, much harder to see our own. So the question is, what outdated assumptions, or yesterday's questions, might be shaping the big decisions in your own work or life? Now that's something we're thinking about.